Good morning and welcome to ACT Reading for Owls, week number 7. This week, we're going to read a practice passage, practice answering 10 questions. I'm going to give you another big tip for completing the ACT reading section successfully, and I'll let you know what you have to do to get ready for next week. Our passage this week is a natural sciences passage called Warp Factor, written by Charles Liu. Here in a moment, I'm going to screen share the passage and questions. But if you want, you can find a PDF of the passage and the questions in the link in the description below. The practice exam link below does have 4 different passages. We are only doing the last one today. We did the previous 3 over the last 3 videos. Here in just a moment, I'm going to survey the questions and then begin reading this passage out loud. If you want, you can fast forward this video when I begin reading if you would rather read the passage on your own. And as always, a note on timing. The time that we take to do this together will be longer than what it would take for doing a passage like this on the real ACT, because I'm going to be pausing and explaining items as we go. And that does not happen when you take a real ACT. So let's flip over to the passage here. Like I said, this is passage number 4. This is a natural sciences passage. It's our first one of this type. Before you read, remember that it's always a good idea to review what the questions are going to be asking so you have a little bit of a heads up for what to look out for as you read. Let's go ahead and survey those real fast. Let's see, 31. Which of the following statements best expresses the main idea of the passage? It can reasonably be inferred from the problem that the author mentions in line 33 refers to. It can be inferred from the passage that the small satellite galaxy referred to is. Based on the passage, which of the following statements best describes Baylin's study as it relates to the field of astronomy? So we're going to learn who this person is. According to the passage, Baylin discovered that the angular momentum of the warped portion of the Milky Way and the angular momentum of the Sagittarius dwarf are. According to the passage, the central bulge of the Milky Way is comprised of. The author refers to the swirling pattern of a hurricane primarily in order to. The passage directly compares the Milky Way's disk as it is affected by its warp to. According to the passage, which of the following statements best describes the movement of the Sagittarius dwarf with respect to the Milky Way? And the passage describes angular momentum as the amount of a system's, and that's the second time we've seen angular momentum. I saw that phrase again over here in number 35. So now that we know a few things to look out for, let's go ahead and begin reading this passage. Again, feel free to pause this or fast forward if you'd rather read this by yourself. Astronomers sometimes describe the shape of our home galaxy, the Milky Way, as a thin crust pizza with a plum stuck in the middle. The plum is the slightly oblong central bulge, protruding about 3,000 light years above and below the galactic plane, comprised mostly of older stars. It makes up the core of the Milky Way and includes a black hole 2.5 million times the mass of the sun. The crust of the pizza is the galactic disk, the source of most of our galaxy's light. Thin and flat, the disk is 100,000 light years across, about 1,000 light years thick on average, and includes more than 80% of the galaxy's 100 billion or so stars. The plum and pizza picture works well enough, but like most simple metaphors, it breaks down if you push it. For one thing, the galactic disk isn't a rigid body, but a loose agglomeration of matter streaming around a common center of gravity. The swirling pattern of a hurricane far better resembles our spinning galaxy. For another thing, our galaxy's disk isn't flat, it's warped. Picture a disk of pizza dough spun around or spun into the air by a skilled chef. Our galaxy goes through the same kind of floppy, wobbly gyrations, though at a rate best measured in revolutions per hundreds of millions of years. Why does the Milky Way have such an odd-looking warp? No definitive answer has emerged. One thing we do know, when it comes to warps, our galaxy is hardly unique. About half of all spiral galaxies are warped to some degree. And I see here that we're getting into lines in the 30s. There were 2 different questions that pertain to this, so let's pay extra close attention as we read. Theoretical and computational models have shown that a number of physical processes can warp a galaxy, so it's a matter of figuring out which scenario applies. An innovative analysis of the problem by Jeremy Baylin, I remember his name from reading through the questions, an astronomy graduate student at the University of Arizona in Tucson, has implicated a small satellite galaxy, currently being ripped to shreds by the gravity of the Milky Way. The Sagittarius dwarf spheroidal galaxy was discovered in 1994. It appears to be in a roughly polar orbit around the Milky Way, that is, above and below the galactic disk, about 50,000 light years from the galactic center. That orbit brings the dwarf galaxy far too close to the huge gravitational tidal forces of the Milky Way for the dwarf to remain intact. As a result, the Sagittarius dwarf now looks something like strands of spaghetti spilling from the front of a pasta-making machine, the galaxy's matter being drawn out over hundreds of millions of years by intergalactic tides. Gravitational collisions between small satellite galaxies and big spiral galaxies have long been regarded as possible culprits in the warping of a larger galaxy's disk. The best known satellite galaxies orbiting the Milky Way, the Large and Small Magellanic Clouds, are too far away and have the wrong orbital characteristics to have warped our galactic home. The Sagittarius dwarf seems a much more likely candidate simply because it is only a third as far from the center of the Milky Way as the Magellanic Clouds. But in astronomy, unlike in real estate, location isn't everything. To show a direct connection between warp and dwarf, the orbital motion of the Sagittarius dwarf must be linked to the rotation of the Milky Way's disk. Baelen's study is the first to find such a link. His analysis of the galactic warp is based on angular momentum. Oh, there's that phrase, a measure of how much a system is spinning or rotating. Just as objects moving in a straight line have momentum, objects spinning or orbiting around an axis have angular momentum. And just as the momenta of two objects combine when they collide, so too do their angular momenta. Imagine two figure skaters coming together for a combination spin. When they make physical contact, their individual spiraling motions combine to produce a single unified swirl. Starting with the latest measurements of the structure and spin of the Milky Way, Baelen deduced the angular momentum of the warped portion of the Milky Way's disk. He then compared that measure with the angular momentum of the Sagittarius dwarf and found for the first time, within the margins of measurement error, that the two angular momenta are identical in both quantity and direction. Such a coupling of the angular momenta of two bodies almost never happens by chance. Usually it takes place only when two spinning systems, like the skaters, come into contact. The coupling isn't enough to prove cause and effect by itself, but it's solid circumstantial evidence that the interaction of the Sagittarius dwarf with the Milky Way disk created the warp in our galaxy. Now that we've read, let's go ahead and begin considering the questions here. And I'm so sorry that my voice is hoarse. Number 31, which of the following statements best expresses the main idea of the passage? Pause this video, take a moment, and see if you can't find an answer. The correct answer for 31 is D. Evidence suggests that the warp in the Milky Way's disk results from the Milky Way's interaction with a small satellite galaxy. This is a key ideas and details question, and there are a lot of those in this passage, just a heads up. We can refer to the beginning of this passage in order to support that answer. Number 32, it can reasonably be inferred from the problem the author mentions in line 33 refers to, let's go up to line 33, an innovative analysis of the problem. All right, go ahead and pause this and see if you can't find an answer. Remember that it's a good idea to start reading actually a few lines before the line in question so that you have context for what the answer might be. The right answer for number 32 is H, the question of which physical processes cause the warp in the Milky Way. And we can look actually right up here for that. Why does the Milky Way have such an odd looking warp? No definitive answer has emerged. Then we go through what we do know. And then when they refer to the problem, they're talking about this right up here. And that again is a key ideas and details kind of question. Number 33, it can reasonably be inferred from the passage that the small satellite galaxy referred to in lines 35 to 36 is, we'll scroll back up so that's on the screen. What is the small satellite galaxy? Okay. Take a moment, pause, rewind a few seconds if you need to see that passage again, and see if you can't find the answer. Number 33 is B, the Sagittarius dwarf. And that's mentioned right here in the very next line. And that again is a key ideas and details question. Like I said, there are a lot of these. In fact, 9 of these are key ideas and details questions. Number 34, based on the passage, which of the following statements best describes Baelen's study as it relates to the field of astronomy? Take a moment and see if you can't find the right answer. The right answer for this question is J. It provided evidence for an idea that scientists had long considered a possibility, but had not yet proved. That again is a key ideas and details question. Number 35. According to the passage, Bailyn discovered that the angular momentum of the warped portion of the Milky Way and the angular momentum of the Sagittarius dwarf are. Take a moment and see if you can't find the answer. Okay. For technical and detailed questions like this, don't be afraid to refer to the passage above. The correct answer here is C, identical in both quantity and direction. And this is, of course, a key ideas and details question. And we can come right back up to the passage if we need to double check that. Let's see. The two angular momenta are identical in both quantity and direction. We see that right here in lines 80 and 81. Number 36, according to the passage, the central bulge of the Milky Way is comprised of. Take a moment and see if you can't find the right answer. The right answer for 36 is G, older stars and a black hole, and that's going to be right up at the beginning of our passage. There we go. Black hole and there we go. Older stars and a black hole, 2.5 million times the mass of the sun. And you already know that's a key ideas and details kind of question. If you read really carefully, and there's some of you probably who knew that answer and were able to identify it without going back to the passage, the more closely that you read the passage the first time through, the easier answering questions like this will be for you. And that's a skill that really is going to come with practice. That's why it's important to do these videos each week. Number 37, the author refers to the swirling pattern of a hurricane primarily in order to. Take a moment and see if you can't find the right answer. All right, the right answer here for 37 is A, and this is the only non-key ideas and details style question. This is a craft and structure question. We can come back up to where they mention the hurricane in order to support that answer. Here we go. The swirling pattern of a hurricane far better resembles our spinning galaxy. And just before that, they say how the plum and pizza picture works well enough, but it breaks down if you push it like most simple metaphors. Number 38. The passage directly compares the Milky Way's disk as it is affected by its warp to. Take a moment and see if you can't find the right answer. All right, the correct answer here is G, and this is a key ideas and details question. I think that most of these, at least F and J, were also referenced in the passage. H, a thin crust pizza on top of a plum. That's not quite how they phrased it above. I believe that they said it was like a thin crust pizza with a plum stuck in the middle of it. However, if we're looking at the Milky Way's disk as it's affected by its warp, it's going to be pizza dough being spun in the air by a chef. Number 39, according to the passage, which of the following statements best describes the movement of the Sagittarius dwarf with respect to the Milky Way? Take a moment and see if you can't find the right answer. The correct answer here is A. It appears to be in a roughly polar orbit around the Milky Way. And this, you already know it, it's a key ideas and details question. And again, don't be afraid to refer back to the text if you need to double check details like this when you're answering questions. And number 40, the passage describes angular momentum as the amount of a system's. Take a moment and see if you can't find the right answer. The answer to number 40 is J, spin or rotation. And of course, it's a key ideas and details question. With things like this that ask you to define words that or terms that you might not have known using the text, don't be afraid to scroll back up and see. Let's see. Oh yeah, here we go. Angular momentum. I remember noting that when you were reading it and being like, oh, I think that we saw that in a question below. A measure of how much a system is spinning or rotating. And that's going to support D being, or excuse me, J being the correct answer there. Okay. Now that we're all finished, here are the answers, just in case you missed one. Note again, like I said earlier, there are a lot of key ideas and details questions here with this passage. I think that that's something that's maybe natural for the natural sciences passage. I think that it's more likely that you're going to see questions like this with that very last passage. Pause the screen if you need to continue seeing these. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and move on. All right, here's your big tip number 5 from PrincetonReview.com. Natural science, that one that we just did, is the last passage on each exam. Remember that ACT exams are always going to be structured in the same way, and natural science will be the last one that you read. This passage is different from the other ones in that typical things that you might have to look out for in reading, things like author's point of view, the tone, emotion, and other typical literary questions, they don't really pertain to natural science texts, and so they're not going to be asked. The passage we just read is all about, the galaxy and different bodies within it. Tone, emotion, those aren't really pertinent to that subject matter. If you did very well in this passage, consider doing it first when you actually take the ACT. Remember that you are allowed to do the passages in whatever order you wish. If you just killed that passage, if you're looking at that like, oh my gosh, is that all that I have to do for that last passage? That's super easy. Feel free to do it first. When your brain is fresh, when you're likelier to get all the questions right. Natural sciences passages will relate to these different topical fields. And the questions within this particular style of passage will be detailed. You might see some technical descriptions. There will also be clear linear organization with clear topic sentences and transitions to develop towards this main idea. The author may or may not have an opinion. More often, the author is not going to have an opinion. And questions are going to track the text pretty closely and require you to make not very many inferences. And that last point right there is really supported by the fact that we had 9 different key ideas and details, sort of the easiest questions, the questions you can simply refer back to the text in order to answer. And then there was just one craft and structure question. In order to get ready for week number 8, you don't have to do anything. Next week, the video is going to feature a brand new practice exam. We're going to read through the first passage together and practice answering the questions. There's no need to do anything at all outside of AI time to prepare for next week. You're going to continue to learn tips, tricks, and strategies for accurately answering questions on the exam. Thank you so much for tuning in and have a wonderful day.